So I thought what we do here is we've sort of met Aubriana, but let the other two guys just take a second and introduce themselves. Jose, if you want to start.
Yeah, my name is Jose Puente. I'm the Director of Mobile Products and Installed Applications for AutoTrader.
Hi, I'm Dan Israel, and I do digital and mobile strategy at Sapient Nitro. We basically provide technology and marketing services for major brands around the world.
Excellent. So we kind of collectively we had a bit of a powwow beforehand, and I thought would be the best way to start this would be to just have these guys kind of give us their interpretation of what location-based marketing is and what it means to you and the work that you do. So why don't we start with Dan this time?
I think it's interesting to look at it in generations, and I think the first generation was probably lat long. People are used to that. That's where subconsciously you're finding out. Or not subconsciously, but you're not necessarily knowing that that's happening. The second generation is a check-in. I think we're accustomed to it, whether it's Foursquare or Shopkick or other services that are out there. The third generation is what I think is coming, and we've alluded to it somewhat, which is the mashup of mobile, of data, and I would also add in the cloud. What I mean by this is that mobile is a general term used for both tablets and for smartphones. Data is critical to understand what is the right information to present. You want it to be contextually relevant, as mentioned in the video. The cloud, I think, is a component that we need to pay more attention to, because a lot of the location offerings, I argue, are more point-based solutions. What I mean by that is that it is an isolated offering that isn't connected to anything else. I've had many friends who go shopping, and what they find in one location, add to a shopping cart, won't necessarily be discovered when they go home and try to look for the item in the shopping cart on a PC. On the back end, it's not all. You're not able to synchronize all of this information in the back end. So the cloud is critical from the standpoint of creating more of an Evernote-like experience. So I think when you talk about location, it has to incorporate, it has to be a mashup among mobility, in other words, the device that you're on, the data, so that way it's contextually relevant, and also cloud, so that way you can synchronize it all in the background.
Go for it.
Okay, so I'll give the answer from Digital Element's perspective, which some of you were asking, is Digital Envoy now Digital Element? So Digital Element is a business unit of Digital Envoy, so if you're familiar with Digital Envoy, that's the same people. So since 1999, we've been working with consumers mostly on the online side from IP targeting. So I think that the answer for what does location mean to us varies by our variety or verticals of clients that we serve. So we work with clients like Facebook and Twitter so that they can serve targeted online ads. So whenever you see those ads that are specific to your zip code or your city, that's our data that's powering that. And then you see other companies like Omniture. So for them, location is something that they can look back on historically and base analytics and how they react to certain business trends off of that data that they're collecting through our IP data. And then the last example that I'll give is probably for the financial institutions and the banking institutions, that our data is empowering them, and location means to them the ability to keep online bankers like you and I secure. So whenever you check into your online bank account, they're doing different checks based off of an IP to make sure you're not masking your location via proxy, or you're not logging in, from Atlanta, Georgia, and an hour later logging in Nigeria. So location to us is, a chance to provide contextually relevant information to consumers, and a chance to improve consumer interaction and keep end consumers and users safe through the transactions that are going across online, mobile, tablet, any digital platform.
So for us, what's slightly different than what we've heard about it from our guest panelists here as well is that we're basically a publisher, and what we do is we connect people that are shopping for cars with thousands of car dealers. And so if you can think about that, it's a very challenging thing. There's millions of cars that are out there. First of all, finding out what car is the right one for you is a big challenge. So the whole thing with geolocation, what it is for us is the convergence of the online world with the offline world, where you actually go to the dealership, and there's two different components that come into play. One is what happens when I go to the dealership. I bet if I asked most of you guys, how many of you love, going to a dealership and buying a car, I'm probably not going to get a lot of hands raised. Probably because you like to beat up dealers, right? That's typically what we see. It's a big pain point for consumers is the whole negotiation process. So for us, it's how do we improve the shopping experience while at the dealership, understanding the needs of the shopper at the dealership in a way that's relevant, and at the same time being able to deliver valuable content in the way of advertising at the right time to the shopper. So you can imagine going to a Honda dealership, for example, and you're looking for a brand new Honda and being able to be detected and get an incentive offer for the new Honda Civic, which is exactly what you're looking for. A lot of times you may not even think about looking for that information, but it's highly relevant because you're right there, you're ready to make the purchase, and it helps drive the conversion. So for us, it's about improving the whole process of buying a car, giving you better experience, and then trying to smooth the whole process of being in the dealership and helping you conclude the transaction.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things I want to tackle here is I think we all recognize that location data is extremely valuable, and it's worth a lot. And so I want to understand from you guys, what are your thoughts on how we can incentivize the consumer to actually share that location data, and how do we encourage them to participate in that process? Let's start with Aubriana this time.
Okay, I was going to volunteer. So with IP-based targeting, that's really the first layer in our minds of defense. If you think of location data as a pyramid, obviously IP, the great thing about it is there's no opt-in necessary. We do not ever capture or store any PII information, personally identifiable information. So it's safe. We are tracking a machine. We don't know where exactly it is, but we do know that it's in a vicinity of a zip code. So a lot of times for advertisers or specific use cases, that is granular enough to give contextually relevant information. So if you want to be able to provide the weather in real time without having to put in your zip code, you can do that. And that's the great thing about IP. But obviously, there are other use cases of when you need to get more granular. You need that lat long so that you can give them directions to a store, so that you can guide a consumer inside of a store if that's as granular as you want to get. So what I feel like I have seen through our various clients and the different interactions that we've seen is that if you can provide a consumer with something that's contextually relevant based on information you already know about them without asking them to opt in and without invading their privacy, then they are much more likely, there's a higher percentage chance that they're going to opt in to share that information with you when they're ready to do that. Mm-hmm. And then also understanding the context of that. So, through IP we can tell, is this a mobile connection or is this a Wi-Fi connection? You already know the device that they're on. So if they're on a mobile device and it's a mobile 3G, 4G connection, that's probably a great time to ask them to opt in because they probably are looking for directions to your store if they're visiting your site. So that's the way that I see it, is starting with the data that you can collect without asking for anything, and then moving them closer to collecting the data at the right time.
Okay. Any comments, Dan?
Yeah, so I would argue that when you're thinking about this, you really need to think about how is it enhancing the experience. Now, the way that you do this, I think American Express has done a very, very good job of figuring out how to really take advantage of location. American Express partnered with Twitter, and basically they've interwoven into the live stream of someone. So some people who are using Twitter, basically, well, they are partnered up with Twitter, but it's also with Foursquare. So really, let me go with the Foursquare piece. That's really what I meant. On the Foursquare, when you check in for Foursquare, you can basically, if you tie in your American Express account on the back end, then you will automatically get exposed to special promotions or discounts at that particular venue. So the genius of this, in my view, is that you're thinking about American Express before you go into the restaurant, as opposed to waiting until you have to pay the bill. and they're integrating into processes that people are already doing. They're not asking you to do anything different. They're not asking you to opt in per se. They are just asking you to say, listen, you're already doing Foursquare. Why don't you just tie it into our American Express card, and then we're going to provide you with something that's going to make you have a better experience. It could be a free appetizer, it could be a discount, whatever it may be.
And just a quick comment on that. So one of the best things about that particular partnership between Amex and Foursquare is that it's easy to drive a coupon or an offer to a mobile device today, right? But where it tends to fall apart is on the redemption side, right? Because quite often, you get into a retail environment and the scanning equipment can't scan that barcode on the phone because there's too much glare or resolution issues or whatever, or even the frontline staff hasn't been trained, properly. So you walk in and say, hey, I'm supposed to get 20% off today, and they're like, they don't know what to do with that. And so the genius of this Amex thing is that you link your Amex card to your Foursquare account, and if you save 20% on your meal at that restaurant tonight, as long as you pay with your Amex card, you don't have to show your phone, scan anything, do anything. It just comes off on your bill, right? It's seamless. So that's, for me, what I love about that particular experience. Let's just jump right into, because we kind of talked about it here a little bit, but the privacy discussion, right? Obviously, I'll start with some numbers. So if we look a year ago now, we looked at location sharing in North America. What we saw was about 12.5–13% of the population was sharing a location at least once a week on some sort of social location platform. We're now at about 28%, so we're growing nicely. We expect we're going to be over around 34–35 by the end of the year. So it's growing. People are getting more comfortable, but there's still a lot of people that aren't willing to do that or are concerned about their privacy. What are your thoughts on that, Jose?
So I think a lot of it you guys have already mentioned. I think it has to do with context, and I also think it has to do with consistency. When you're using a brand, right now you have so many choices. There's so many different options to get the information that you want. What makes you loyal to one particular brand versus another? One example that I like to use sometimes is like Hotels.com has a pretty consistent user experience, and they add value, and the more you use it and the more the more things you do, the more value it brings back to you. So the more you give, the more you get. So I think consistency is a key component of that. I think there's a very fine line between doing it right and doing it wrong, and you don't have to, when you cross over into doing it wrong, your penalty is pretty severe. You're going to lose that customer probably forever, and they're going to tell all their friends, and so it's a huge impact. If you do it right, they're not going to say anything. They're just going to be happy.
Yeah.
So I think context, consistency, and just making sure that you're preserving the permission that the person is giving to you.
Dan?
So on this front, it's interesting. Aubriana works with someone that worked in a startup that I had with 5 other friends. We started this company, and it was interesting. We were creating broadband, turnkey broadband applications. What was interesting is we were trying to get information from the customers so that way we could share that with broadband service providers. No one would give us anything. But if I offered a stupid free hat, all of a sudden I had people willing to give me stuff. And I give you that example because if you're giving something that people think they want, or you're giving something that in their mind is valuable, then they're going to share the goods. And that's really what it boils down to. You have to provide something of value to the customer. And at the end of the day, when you're talking about what do you do to get this, a lot of times the glue, I think, is really the loyalty program. You have to provide incentives for people to get something. I'm fascinated by the fact that Target and Macy's still don't have a loyalty program. They outsource it to a third party, and they're not getting any of that data. It doesn't make any sense to me. A loyalty program is what can really be the glue between your online and your offline experience, and it also is a tool to incentivize people to share information. Right now, if you don't have a loyalty program, the only thing in terms of glue could be having a credit card on the back end associated with your account, but usually that's going to be with iTunes, with Amazon, or with PayPal in that order. Those are the big boys when it comes to who has the data on the end.
Yeah, I mean, we sum it up as value plus relevance equals, here's my data, right? As long as you're personally relevant and valuable to that individual, they don't think about it, to Jose's comment. I want to throw a little corollary piece to that, though, and challenge you guys a little bit. I agree with everything you say, but one of the new business models that we've seen emerge lately is this thing that we call data vaulting. And this is the idea that consumers are realizing that their data is worth something. They're getting smart about it, and so some new startups have started to basically say, all right, consumers, put all your information in here, put all your demographic stuff, put all your data in here, and every time an advertiser wants to use it, you're going to get paid in a microtransaction, 5 cents, 10 cents, whatever. What do you guys think about that?
So I don't know, you guys.
How many actual advertisers or marketers do we have in here? A few. Okay.
So most of you guys probably heard about the big, WhatsApp acquisition that Facebook made, and what intrigued me the most about it was, why would you pay $19 billion for a messaging app, when there's so many of them that are out there? I mean, I got a 15-year-old kid, he doesn't use it, he uses an app called Kick, which has just probably quite a good
Canadian
number
company,
of users,
by the way.
right?
It's a good Canadian company.
but what intrigued me was when I went into their site, I looked and it said, they explicitly say we don't sell advertising, we don't collect data, and then I matched that with it's a $19 billion company,
Yeah.
right? So they had no real revenue model, and they're explicitly saying we don't collect your data.
Yet.
And there's a right, but there's a whole amount of things that are going on right now. There are devices that you can buy that basically route all your internet traffic and block ads and protect your privacy. There's a browser called Tor, which is basically an anonymous browser that encrypts all your data. There's a phone that's out right now called Freedom Pop that basically encrypts all your data. So I think we're at the beginning of this next phase of where people are saying, wait a second, exactly what you're saying, where there's some startups that are trying to, put the consumer in the position to commercialize themselves. But I also think that there's another whole dimension that's going on that people should pay attention to about, how people are going to start taking privacy more seriously. And they're going to have access to more tools. They're going to block, what people can and can't do for them.
But it comes down to value, right? At the end of the day, you can get people to do this stuff as long as you're giving them what they want, right?
And I think that's kind of the challenge, because if you look at all the different technologies and all the dependencies on technologies and the infrastructure and the different devices and the applications and operating systems that people use, it's very challenging to track all that stuff, and then you're relying on these companies to basically capture all your data and make assumptions about you and decide what they're gonna push to you. And I think that's where the real tension is going to be. I think that's where the real opportunity is going to be for a lot of companies, is figuring out. I think there's going to be a lot of companies that are going to make a lot of big mistakes. We're going to hear about them, right? They're going to blow up because they're going to be like, hey, first it was the Target thing, but there's going to be a lot more like that coming. And they're not intentional. They're just going to happen because that's what people think they should be doing.
Yeah, agreed. I want to go out to the audience now and take questions.